welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm Elliott Margolis, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Gail Burke, Stuart Gardner, and George Binns. We're doing another 5-1, so it's the four of us. We've got an interesting and timely topic for you today. It's Black Lives Matter. And do they really matter is the question. Does Black Lives matter to Black lives? Stuart, why don't you explain what Black Lives Matter is supposed to be?
Well, I'm no expert, but I did do some research, and if you go to their webpage, I picked out some choice policy objectives of theirs and whatnot, and so I'll read a few. Things like we acknowledge, respect, and celebrate differences and commonalities. We work vigorously for freedom and justice for Black people and by extension, all people. We intentionally build and nurture a beloved community that is bonded together through a beautiful struggle that is restorative, not depleting. We build a space that affirms Black women and is free from sexism, misogyny, and environments which men are centered. We every day we recommit to healing ourselves and each other and co-creating alongside comrades, allies, and a family culture where each person feels seen, heard, and supported. That's just a few of the things that are on their website. Sounds like a horrible organization. I think they should be terrorists.
Okay, Gail, what do you have to say about that?
Hey, I wonder if Black Lives Matter really does matter to Black lives. Do they really care about Black lives? It seems like they care more about violence that is done to Blacks if police are involved. Otherwise, they don't seem to care. Even though Black on Black is many multiples more lethal and more common, resulting in many more Black casualties. I'd also like to get into the fact that they are always talking about slavery in the United States. That seems to be the basis for a lot of their anger. But they don't ever talk about slavery in the modern world. I don't know whether they know, whether they are aware of it, but many people don't understand that slavery still exists in the modern world. There are currently an estimated 9.2 million Black slaves in Africa. Slavery includes forced labor, forced sexual exploitation, and forced marriage. According to the UN's International Labor Organization, there are more than 3 times as many people in forced servitude today as were captured and sold during the 350-year span of the transatlantic slave trade. That's from Time magazine, March 14th, 2019. There are also slaves in the UK. Most of the slaves in the UK, however, are not Black. They're more Albanians and Vietnamese. Excuse me.
All right, but let's try and stick to Black Lives Matter in the United States, because that's really what we're talking about.
But Black Lives Matter is all over the world. They're destroying places all over the world, Elliott. So we have to talk about it.
Gail, I would think that while slavery exists in many countries, it's more like indentured servitude as opposed to the slavery, the Black slavery. But it's also, I kind of agree with Elliott. You're comparing something that happened 300 years ago. I don't want to jump in, but I think Black Lives Matter is a movement. You guys kind of like see it as this creature or a person. There's not a person that's a Black Lives Matter.
No, nobody thinks it's a person.
It's not. It's saying that our system is broken. It's saying that the way we police our streets, the way we do stuff, it's not working for a whole class of people. It would be better if it said, like people that aren't in the justice, people that don't have the money to afford the justice system lives matter. Because what happens is you intentionally, and I don't want to use the word disenfranchise because it's overused, but you disenfranchise a whole group of people, and those people happen to be Black.
But
George, what do you have to say about it?
Let me make one comment, Elliott.
Right.
Stuart, you have to understand that many of the people in this movement are violent people. One of the leaders of the movement has said, if we don't get our way, we're going to burn down buildings.
Yeah,
And
I saw him on
exactly-
Fox News. Stop watching Fox News.
All right,
It has
George.
nothing to do with Fox News. That's the reality of it.
Elliott.
George.
Oh, George.
Okay. Basically, we've got several problems in this country. There's no doubt about it. But as countries go, we're the best as far as trying to solve them. We ain't there yet. We got a long way to go. But there is a serious problem with how we treat minorities. And this has been an ongoing problem for hundreds of years. It's just that the minority de jure keeps changing. It used to be the Irish, then it was the Italians, and all along the way it was the freed slaves. And the problem keeps persisting, and as far as I'm concerned, it's an economic problem because whoever's living in the low rent district gets an awful lot of police attention. And that's where the rubber meets the road. In that all of these incidents we've been talking about lately, it's been a case where the police have gone to investigate or respond to a warrant and something went wrong. Either they kicked in the door on the wrong place and somebody tried to defend themselves and somebody got killed in the onslaught, crossfire, or it's a case of some individual was charged or about to be charged with something and didn't cooperate with the police and it went down bad. And this seems to be a consistent event. So the question comes down to one, if we want to talk about the very fine point of Black Lives Matter being focused on the relations with the police, then that is a situation where we have to understand what's wrong with this relationship. And in the case of the Denny's shootout, the individual was about to be handcuffed, grabbed a gun, started running away, turned back and started to fire back at the police. Not a good situation. It's going to go bad from there. So the question comes down to how do we, first of all, get the message across that once you're in police custody, it's over. And at the same time, how do we get the message across to the police that every time you have an event, it doesn't mean you have to pull out a gun and shoot somebody or physically wrestle them to the ground and everybody jumps on them. Something's wrong with the way the system manages itself. It's not doing a good job.
Okay, George, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on that, and I'm going to show you why with some statistics. First of all, this is from the FBI murder statistics. Race of victim. White victims, 3,499. Race of the offender, black, 533 out of those 3,499 that were killed by people. Race of the victim in blacks. Black victims, 2,870. The offender, the white offender, 243. So here's the statistics right up here, which shows you that it's really not an instance of prejudice against the police. Furthermore, from the Wall Street Journal, however sickening the video of Floyd's arrest, it isn't representative of the 375 million annual contacts that police officers have with civilians. A solid body of evidence shows no structural bias in the criminal justice system with regard to arrest, prosecution, or sentencing. In 2019, police officers fatally shot 1,004 people, most of whom were armed or otherwise dangerous, African Americans were about a quarter of those killed. In 2018, the latest year for such data has been published, African Americans made up 53% of known homicide offenders in the United States and committed about 60% of the robberies, though they're only 13% of the population. Police fatally shot 9 unarmed blacks and 19 unarmed whites in 2019. We do not have a systemic problem in this country.
No, wait a second. I got to respond to that. I think that's, Elliott, I completely disagree with you. And I actually think George and I are on the same page. Here's what I don't understand. You know, everyone loves Ronald Reagan, and his big quote was, what, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, and that's the biggest, joke or whatever, indicating that the government can't do anything right. We don't want health care from the government, they're incompetent. We don't want this, we want free markets. So if we can go to the concept that the government, if the government's incompetent, why all of a sudden is the justice system beyond reproach? That makes no sense, Elliott. The justice system has failed minorities from the beginning of this country. A $500 fine, it sucks, right? But it doesn't mean that much for me. I'm a lawyer. I can make $500. A $500 fine ruins a poor person. And what happens is then you concentrate that on people that look different. In other words, the black man is easy to identify, and they all live in some group. And George, you said on the last show, the city that was getting 70% of their revenue from disenfranchising black people, from saying, you have to show up to court, or you got to go to jail because you can't pay, and all this stuff. These people can never get off of first base. So there is a system breakdown here, Elliott. I think you're 100% wrong there.
Well, let me ask you something, Stuart. If you feel that way about it, how do some prominent black people ever get out from under? I mean, you have many prominent black people. Look at Oprah Winfrey. She came from nothing. And look what she did.
I'm sure a lot of people came from it.
Look at the black people in our government. Look at Dr. Ben Carson. He came from nothing. You have people like Thomas Sowell, a famed economist. All these people, and one of the reasons that they did so well, they do not think of themselves as victims. The Democrats want to keep the blacks as victims. And that's what's happened in education. Their schools are terrible, worse than the white schools, and for the most part. That is the problem of government.
And to take Gail's point one step further, the big cities, Detroit, Los Angeles, New York, St. Louis, Baltimore, have been run by Democrats for 50, 60, 70 years. Democrats have offered them better schools, better jobs, better home life. What's happened? More crime, more unemployment, and total disasters in those areas. And to go one step further, from the time slavery ended until the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson, black families, 80% of them were together, husband, wife, children. After the Great Society, it's now 30%. Democrats don't try to help people. Democrats try to help themselves to stay in power. And that's evidence right there of that.
They want to keep them as victims so that they will keep promising them we can do better. We will do better. Look at 2016 election. There were many, many black people who voted against Trump, okay? They were told, and in the election before that, when Obama was running, everything will be free. Bernie Sanders, same thing. Everything will be free. They thought, and they believed it. Well, it didn't happen. It'll never happen.
I'm not saying,
and they are still victims.
I'm not saying there's not like a personal responsibility element here. I'm saying that this is about Black Lives Matter movement. The Black Lives Matter movement is saying the system is broken and is not working for disenfranchised people. The black people are just the ones. Let me just finish.
If the Black Lives Matter cared about black lives, they would care about Chicago. They would care about St. Louis. They would care about Detroit, because that's where black lives are being lost.
I think if the system was better prepared, and look, there may be a whole generation of 20-something people that are already kind of in the system and you're not going to be able to save. But I think if we say we want to make the system fair, we start with young people, and we start with very young people, and we start educating them, and we start sending them, spending more money. I don't have all the answers, but the way that what the Black Lives Matter is saying is that the system is broken and it has to be fixed. And I agree with that. I see it every day. As I said, you guys think the whole government's a mess, except for, of course, the justice system, which is beyond reproach.
Well, let me ask you something else, Stuart. Look at the cities in Seattle, for instance. Look what happened in Seattle. Democrat mayor, she allowed the BLM and the Antifa, who have teamed up, she allowed them to take over a section of the city. When she did that, there were shootings. There were two young black men that were murdered. They were shot. They were killed. We don't see BLM do anything about that. But that's what happens. And now they're talking about, well, we're going to defund the police because we don't need the police. We're going to police ourselves, which is utterly horrifying.
I don't think anyone wants to defund the police.
Oh, yes, they do.
It's a reallocation of funding.
Yes, they do. To who?
To organizations that are better suited to keeping the peace, as opposed to
Like what?
I don't look, Gail, I don't have all the answers. I just
There aren't any.
You do realize that the Black Lives Matter is not a civil organization, it's a political organization who donates to the Democratic Party. You do realize that, correct? You also realize that the Black Lives Matter came out and said, they want to kill police.
It's not as an official position, Elliott. It's not an official position to kill the police.
They said it. Their leaders are saying it, Stuart. You have to get away from CNN.
Your leader retweeted a guy yelling "white power." Is that his position? What if he goose-stepped on the White House lawn? Would you say something? Everything that a black person says, the guy on Fox News that said we're going to tear it down. I saw him. He's some leader of some small borough in New York, and they put him on Fox News for people like you guys that go, look, they want to kill people. If you talk to the majority of the Black Lives Matter, I read it. We practice empathy. We engage comrades with the intent to learn and connect with their context. We make open spaces and family friendly. I get it, Elliott.
Those are just position papers, Stuart.
I think one of the problems with our society is the breakdown of the family. There is no control, but why is that? Is it because the black guy committed a crime and you put him in jail, or because the system was wrong and he ended up in jail?
It's
Either way,
because we encourage them to break up because we give the people more money when they have kids. George, how about you? Where are you on this?
Basically, I'm still at the point of we've got one particular problem that has caused people to protest. Unfortunately, while all these do-gooders were out protesting, another faction, not associated with them politically, but opportunistically, came out and burned and killed and maimed and beat up people and essentially had a free lunch at every store in town. So part of the problem is there is a group that is making this whole situation absolutely worse. And unfortunately, it's not going to change anything because, as I mentioned the last time, after the 65 riots in Los Angeles over Rodney King's escapades with the police, the words were "burn, baby, burn," and they did. And the president at the time sent in the troops to put the fire out and stop the looting. The problem right now is there is too many, what I would refer to as spineless, pandering politicians who are too afraid to do the job they signed up for, which is protect the people. And they just let everything go. Seattle is probably the worst case. The incident in St. Louis the other day, where some mob broke through a gate and started rampaging through somebody's property on their way to someplace else. And everybody wants to say, oh, that was a peaceful protest. If the guy and his wife didn't show up on the front lawn with a couple of guns, I'm wondering how long that would have been peaceful. And if you listen to his side of the story, they were threatening to kill him, his wife, and his dog and burn the house down. And of course, nobody from that group that went through is going to stand up and say, oh, no, we didn't do that. So there is two factions involved, and you've got to separate the two, because one faction has a legitimate concern that some of the police are getting to be overly aggressive, or in the case of Ferguson, there are some administrations that are taking advantage of the poor situation and trying to balance the budget on the backs of the minority. So these are separate situations. And if you keep lumping them all together, there is no one solution that's going to fix everything.
And then you have de Blasio in New York, and his relationship with his police is terrible. It has been since he was elected mayor. They hate him, and with good reason. He doesn't back them up. He's in favor of defunding them. Now that's pretty bad for a city as crime-ridden as New York, for the mayor and the governor to be in sympathy.
As I mentioned the last time, as soon as you start to make the police victims of some situation, then you're going to get a totally different attitude from the police as to, hey, we got to protect each other.
That's right.
As opposed to, well, we just go out and do the job we want. And when we go out to do the job we want, we're accepted in the community as a positive force. Right now, the police are interpreted by the media as a bunch of bad guys out to do nasty things to anybody, including people of some minority group. But as Elliott pointed out, if you look at the statistics, it's not a definitely a minority approach. Everybody gets attacked by the police.
Well, if you go back to Seattle, the mayor, apparently this violent group came into her neighborhood, and that's when she finally took a stand. The police went in armed and cleaned out that section of Seattle. They removed all the barricades. They cleaned up the filth. So they actually did something positive. And if they can get the police, now the police, for the most part, they're doing a good job. Yeah, there are bad guys. That's up to the unions. That's up to the mayors. That's up to the police commissioners to handle that. But for the most part, these guys go in every day. They go in to homes where there's domestic violence. They never know what they're going to run into. So,
let's face it, in every single profession, there's good and there's bad.
Right.
And that's the way it is. But we're getting somewhat low in time, and I want to bring out one other thing that's really, to me, very important. Our mayor, the mayor of the city of Beverly, took down the MIA flag at City Hall and replaced it with Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
And I'd like to get people's comments on what the mayor has done and see what we think we can do about it.
Who pressured him to do it?
What?
Who pressured him to do it?
I have no idea. But the mayor, obviously the mayor and the city council were in agreement.
Was there a reason? Did he say why?
I didn't hear you.
Like, why take down a flag to put up another one? Can't you put?
Well, they took down the MIA flag, the POW MIA flag, and put up Black Lives Matter.
I'd have to find out more. I mean, I don't see why the two organizations have nothing to do with each other. You know, I don't understand why.
There's only so much room on the flagpole. George, what do you think?
Well, basically, I think the city of Beverly has shown that it wants to jump on the bandwagon of every one of these little groups that comes through. look at the two churches downtown that put up Black Lives Matter banner and immigrants and refugees welcome banner. So every time there's a politically correct issue, somebody in town has to jump on the bandwagon and say, me too, without any initiative to do anything about it. You can go ask any of these groups, how many of these refugees or how many of these minority groups are you supporting and in what way? Gets to be a very short conversation.
Stuart, what do you think?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, I certainly support the mayor putting up a Black Lives Matter flag. I don't see like a black versus blue lives matter. I think they both do. I don't think it's not a versus. As I said, I think the system's broken.
So it's an all lives matter.
So right now, I think that back to the Black Lives Matter thing. I think their house is on fire. You don't. All houses matter, of course, but you go to the house that's on fire, right? And I think that black people are saying we're not making it, and then you guys can argue why, but we can either escalate a war and have a race war, or we can say, you know what, how are we going to fix this? And you all want better education, you all want equal opportunity. You got to find ways to do it. Up until 2 weeks ago, you could fire someone for being gay. If they walked in, they did a good job, they were busted their ass, but they love another man, you could fire them. I think that's wrong. Up until 20 years ago, 30 years ago, up until 30 years ago, you could fire someone for being black before the Civil Rights Act. They did a good job. They showed up on time. You could fire them for being black. They had deeds that black people couldn't buy houses. It was in the deed. The system is broken. And that's what Black Lives Matter is saying. The system is broken. You guys go off on tangents about this black guy that says this one thing and Seattle let this happen. I get it. Those are you're probably 100% right about those things. The issue is, the bigger issue at hand is the system is broken, and either you're going to fix it or go to war with the people.
Okay, but do you understand the causal link between 13% of the population is black and 60% of the crimes are from blacks? Do you understand that 13 people got killed in Chicago this weekend, all black, killed by black? Nobody cares. Nobody talks about it. They talk about one situation that happened in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and that cop was wrong, and that cop's in jail amongst the other 3 cops that watched. What's wrong with that?
The problem we're struggling with is that, as Elliott started to point out, one issue gets to be the press's so caused to do something. And as a result, there's a lot of other stuff going on that needs to be fixed. And I think I pointed out the last time, there has been a commission formed after every one of these race riots and has come up with the same set of conclusions. And nobody does anything about it. It's the politicians that are in office that say they want to do the job, and they've got the instructions on what should we be doing. They're not doing it because it doesn't perpetuate their existence.
Well, one of the problems is the education. You and I have talked about this, and we've interviewed the superintendent of schools several times about education and how it's not doing the job. And unfortunately, what many people think, well, we got to throw more money at it. Throwing more money at it does nothing. You have terrible programs. Common Core is a disaster designed by non-educators. It's all throughout the schools, and all it teaches kids, it doesn't teach them any history, certainly doesn't teach them math or English or literature or anything. It's all about social awareness. That's the main thrust of education today. And of course, Black lives, minorities, they're all victims. Well, we have to get away from this victimology. They're not victims, but as long as little kids and they're people like de Blasio telling his son, you got to be careful of the police because they're going to come after you. Well, when you tell your children things like that, you've made them.
We've got 10 seconds to go on this, so We got to wrap it up. Thank you for watching. I hope it was educational. I hope you learned something. Talk to the mayor if you want to talk to the mayor.
Talk to
And
me.
we'll see you at our next show.
All right, guys.